The emergency klaxons screamed through the Galactic Council chambers like wounded animals, their piercing wails echoing off crystal walls that had witnessed 1,000 years of diplomatic victories. Today, those same walls trembled with fear. Admiral Korthak stood at the center of the circular amphitheater, his forearms clasped behind his battle-scarred carapace, and watching as representatives from 73 civilizations filed into their hovering seats with expressions ranging from panic to outright terror. The Zephyrian commander's mandibles clicked in what his species considered dark amusement. Esteemed colleagues, Korthak began, his voice carrying the weight of 4 decades commanding fleets across the Outer Rim. We are here to discuss what my tactical analysts have so eloquently termed the human problem. He paused, letting his compound eyes sweep across the assembly. Though I prefer to call it the human solution, because in 72 hours they have permanently solved 3 of our most persistent military headaches. A nervous chittering erupted from the crystalline delegation. Councillor Vex Nash, her translucent form flickering with anxiety, raised a trembling appendage. Admiral, surely you exaggerate. The humans are pacifists. They avoid conflict at every opportunity. Korthak's laugh was like grinding metal. Oh, they avoid war all right, Counselor. They avoid it like a tornado avoids trailer parks, like a black hole avoids light, like death avoids the living. His scarred face twisted into something approximating a grin, which is to say, they don't avoid it at all. They just make everyone else think they do, right up until entire star systems start going dark. The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Each delegate now understanding that their comfortable assumptions about humanity were about to be shattered like glass in a hurricane. Let me take you back 50 years, Korthak continued, his voice dripping with the kind of bitter wisdom that only comes from surviving your own stupidity. Back when Ambassador Velux first made contact with these charming little bipeds. He gestured to the holographic display, which flickered to life showing archived footage of humanity's first diplomatic encounter. The image showed a modest human vessel, barely the size of a Zephyrian scout ship, drifting peacefully toward the massive Galactic Council dreadnought. No weapons signatures, no aggressive posturing, just a simple message broadcast in broken universal standard: we come in peace. We seek friendship. Velux was so impressed, Korthak sneered, pulling up the original contact report. Quote, "This species demonstrates remarkable pacifist tendencies. They appear to abhor violence and show genuine distress when conflict is mentioned. Recommend immediate classification as non-threatening." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a bad smell. Non-threatening. That's what we called them. The holodisplay shifted to show decades of human diplomatic activity. Peace treaties signed with warring factions, humanitarian aid delivered to disaster zones, conflict mediation services offered freely to any species that asked. The humans seemed to pop up everywhere there was suffering, like some sort of galactic charity organization with delusions of grandeur. "Look at this record," Korthak said, his voice thick with mockery. 50 years of handshakes and hugs, food shipments and medical supplies, peace negotiations and cultural exchanges. They even established something called the Interspecies Harmony Foundation. Harmony. Can you believe the audacity? Chancellor Vex Nash's form shimmered uncertainly. But Admiral, this evidence supports our assessment. They clearly prefer peaceful solutions to, we believed, their propaganda. Korthak roared, his 4 fists slamming onto the podium with enough force to crack the reinforced crystal. Every single one of us bought into their act. Peace-loving humans, too civilized for war, too advanced for violence. We thought they were weak. His mandibles clicked rapidly, the Zephyrian equivalent of hysterical laughter. Turns out, they were just being polite. The Trilaxian Empire made the first mistake, Korthak continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. Emperor Gaxon decided he needed more agricultural worlds for his expanding population. And there, sitting pretty in the Kepler system, was this lovely little human colony on 442 billion. Just farmers, you understand. Peaceful, defenseless farmers growing space wheat and raising livestock. The holodisplay shifted to show orbital surveillance footage of the human settlement. Rolling green fields, modest dome structures, children playing in carefully maintained parks. It looked like a postcard from some idealized pastoral paradise. Axon's War Council estimated a 3-day conquest, Korthak said, his tone suggesting what he thought of that particular bit of strategic genius. After all, what could a few thousand farmers do against the might of the Trilaxian 7th Fleet? 12 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, over 200 support vessels. It was going to be a massacre, and everyone knew it. The display now showed the approaching Trilaxian armada, their ships bristling with weapons, moving in perfect formation toward the unsuspecting human world. It was beautiful, in the way that approaching storms are beautiful just before they destroy everything in their path. The humans detected the fleet 3 days out, Korthak continued. And do you know what their response was? Not a call for military aid, not a desperate evacuation, not even a strongly worded diplomatic protest. He paused for effect, savoring the memory. They sent a single transmission to Emperor Gaxon himself. Quote, "Your Imperial Majesty, we respectfully request that you reconsider this course of action. We have no desire for conflict, but we feel obligated to warn you that you will not like what happens next. Please turn back." A wave of nervous laughter rippled through the assembled delegates. Even now, knowing what they knew, the human response seemed almost childishly naive. Emperor Gaxon's reaction was recorded for posterity, Korthak said, pulling up another file. He laughed so hard he nearly choked on his ceremonial war drink. His exact words were, "What are they going to do? Throw vegetables at us?" The entire Trilaxian command staff found it hilarious. They even broadcast the human message on their entertainment networks as a comedy bit. The Admiral's expression grew cold, his compound eyes reflecting the harsh light of the chamber. 3 days later, General Marcus Thane of the Human Colonial Defense Force sent his own message to the smoldering remains of the Trilaxian fleet. And this one, colleagues, was not polite. Korthak's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We tried to warn you. War isn't our hobby. It's our profession." Korthak turned away from the display, his scarred carapace catching the light as he faced the assembled delegates. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a commander who had stared into the abyss and found something staring back. "That's when it hit me," he said, his mandibles clicking slowly. "We had it completely backwards. Humans don't avoid war because they're weak. They avoid war because they're terrifyingly good at it. They avoid unnecessary war the same way a master surgeon avoids unnecessary surgery, not because they can't cut, but because they know exactly how much damage they can do." The chamber was so quiet that the soft whisper of recycled air seemed deafening. Korthak began pacing, his forearms gesticulating as the full horror of his realization unfolded. "Think about it," he continued, his voice gaining intensity. 50 years of peaceful contact, 50 years of handshakes and humanitarian missions, 50 years of them studying every single one of us like specimens in a laboratory. Every cultural exchange was an intelligence operation. Every peace treaty was a data collection exercise. Every act of charity was reconnaissance wrapped in a smile. Councillor Vex Nash's form flickered with agitation. "Admiral, surely you're being paranoid. The humans genuinely helped us during the crystalline plague outbreak. They saved millions of lives." Korthak's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh, they saved lives all right. And while they were doing it, they learned everything about our biology, our immune systems, our population centers, our medical infrastructure. They know which diseases we're vulnerable to, which treatments we depend on, which medical facilities are critical to our survival." He paused, letting that sink in. "Tell me, Counselor, if they wanted to eliminate your species tomorrow, how long do you think it would take them?" The crystalline being's glow dimmed to almost nothing. "They study us for decades before they fight us," Korthak continued relentlessly. "While we see diplomats and peacekeepers, they see intelligence officers and advanced scouts. That human anthropologist who spent 15 years documenting Trilaxian military traditions? He knew their command structure better than their own generals. That human engineer who helped upgrade hegemony space stations, he installed backdoors in every system. That human doctor who revolutionized Dominion medical care, she created targeted biological weapons that could wipe out their entire species in 72 hours. The revelation hit the assembly like a physical blow. Delegates began checking their own records, their own interactions with humanity, suddenly seeing patterns they had missed before. "The most terrifying part?" Korthak asked, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow reached every corner of the chamber. "They genuinely mean it when they offer peace. They really do prefer diplomatic solutions. They honestly want to avoid conflict." His compound eyes swept across the assembly. "But when they decide that war is necessary, when they conclude that peaceful options have been exhausted, they don't just fight to win. They fight to make sure the question never comes up again." He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed tactical analyses of the 3 recent conflicts. "You know your enemy better than they know themselves. That's not just strategy to them, it's philosophy, it's religion, it's the foundation of everything they do." "Let me walk you through exactly how the Trilaxian Empire died," Korthak said, his voice taking on the clinical tone of a pathologist examining a corpse. "Because understanding their annihilation is the key to understanding what we're really dealing with." The holographic display shifted to show the Trilaxian 7th Fleet in all its terrible glory, hundreds of warships arranged in perfect battle formation as they approached the human colony. Their confidence was almost tangible, radiating from every precisely positioned vessel. "Admiral Nexus commanded the fleet personally," Korthak continued. "Veteran of 37 successful campaigns, conqueror of 18 star systems. A military genius by any reasonable standard. He was so certain of victory that he brought his entire extended family to witness the glorious conquest. They set up viewing platforms on the command ship's observation deck. The display zoomed in on the lead dreadnought, showing the ornate viewing areas where Trilaxian nobility had gathered to watch the slaughter. Children pointed excitedly at the approaching human world, while their parents sipped ceremonial war wine and placed bets on how quickly the resistance would crumble. The human response was immediate and, from a conventional standpoint, completely predictable, Korthak said. Their small defense fleet, maybe 20 ships total, took one look at the approaching armada and turned tail. Full retreat, engines at maximum burn, running scared toward the outer system like rabbits fleeing wolves. A bitter laugh escaped the Admiral's mandibles. Admiral Nexus was delighted. He even had his communications officer broadcast taunts at the fleeing humans, calling them cowards and weaklings. The viewing galleries erupted in cheers. Victory was so close they could taste it. The display now showed the human ships in apparent full retreat, their formations scattered and disorganized, engines glowing white-hot as they fled deeper into the system. It looked exactly like what terrified civilians would do when faced with overwhelming military force. "That's when the first surprise hit," Korthak said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. The fleeing human ships suddenly wheeled around in perfect coordination, revealing that their panicked retreat had positioned them exactly where they needed to be. They weren't running away. They were setting up a three-dimensional chessboard. And the Trilaxians were the pieces about to be sacrificed. The hologram shifted to show the tactical reality. The human ships had used their retreat to position themselves at strategic points throughout the system, creating overlapping fields of fire and cutting off all escape routes. What had looked like chaos was actually mathematical precision. But that was just the opening move, Korthak continued, his compound eyes reflecting the horror of memory. Because while Admiral Nexus was enjoying his moment of triumph, every single Trilaxian military installation, every command center, for every strategic asset in the entire empire was simultaneously exploding. The display erupted into a cascade of destruction. Military bases vanished in nuclear fire, space stations cracked apart like eggs, orbital shipyards collapsed into twisted metal. The scale of coordinated devastation was breathtaking. Humans had been living among the Trilaxians for decades, Korthak said, his voice heavy with the weight of realization. Scientists, engineers, cultural attaches, trade representatives, every single one of them a sleeper agent. They knew every security protocol, every defensive weakness, every critical system. When the time came, they activated simultaneously across 300 worlds. Counselor Vex Nash's form was flickering rapidly with distress. But the casualties, the civilian populations, surgical, precise, absolutely ruthless, Korthak interrupted. Military targets only, but every single one eliminated within the first 6 hours. Command and control, gone. Fleet coordination severed, supply lines obliterated. The Trilaxian Empire went from galactic superpower to isolated clusters of confused survivors in less time than it takes most species to file a formal complaint. The hologram now showed the final phase of the battle. The Trilaxian fleet, cut off from all support and surrounded by perfectly positioned human forces, simply surrendered. There was no dramatic final battle, no heroic last stand, but just the cold mathematics of absolute tactical superiority. 72 hours, Korthak said quietly. From first shot to total capitulation. An empire that had existed for 3,000 years, erased from the galactic map in 3 days. Now you might think the Trilaxian annihilation was an isolated incident, Korthak continued, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed the impossible become routine. Perhaps a lucky strike, a one-time tactical masterpiece that couldn't possibly be repeated. The Hegemony High Command certainly thought so when they decided to test human resolve over mining rights in the Vega system. The holographic display shifted to show the imposing bulk of Hegemony warships, their distinctive angular hulls bristling with enough firepower to crack planets. These weren't the ceremonial fleets of an overconfident empire. These were hardened veterans, battle-tested warriors who had carved their reputation from the bones of 100 conquered worlds. Fleet Admiral Korvan was no fool like Nexus, Korthak said with grudging respect. He studied the Trilaxian defeat, analyzed every tactical decision, prepared for human deception. His fleet was ready for infiltrators, ready for coordinated strikes, ready for the unexpected. What he wasn't ready for was 47 hours of absolutely sincere diplomatic negotiations. The display showed conference rooms, communication channels buzzing with activity, human diplomats working around the clock to find peaceful solutions. Document after document, proposal after proposal, every conceivable compromise explored with the patience of saints and the thoroughness of accountants. The humans tried everything, Korthak said, his tone mixing admiration with horror. Territory sharing agreements, mineral rights partnerships, joint mining ventures, phased withdrawal schedules, compensation packages, cultural exchange programs. They spent 47 hours genuinely, desperately trying to avoid conflict. Ambassador Patricia Wong didn't sleep for 3 days straight, trying to find a solution both sides could accept. Counselor Vex Nash's form brightened with confusion. But surely that proves they are peaceful. They exhausted every diplomatic option. Korthak's laugh was like grinding stone. Oh, they exhausted them all right. Every single peaceful possibility explored to its absolute limit, documented with meticulous care, certified by neutral observers. And when Fleet Admiral Korvan finally said no to the last, most generous offer humanity could make, when he declared that hegemony forces would take the system by force, the Admiral paused, savoring the memory. Captain Elena Brooks of the Human Diplomatic Corps delivered the most terrifying sentence in galactic history. The display showed a tired-looking human woman, her hair disheveled from days of negotiations, dark circles under her eyes from exhaustion. When she spoke, her voice was calm, professional, almost apologetic. We prefer peace, but we're exceptional at war. 26 hours later, the hegemony ceased to exist as a military power, Korthak continued. Same pattern, same surgical precision, same absolute thoroughness. But this time we were watching. This time we saw the method behind the madness. The hologram showed the systematic dismantling of hegemony infrastructure. Not random destruction, not mindless violence, but calculated elimination of every asset that could pose a future threat. It was like watching a master surgeon remove a cancer, cutting away only what was necessary but ensuring nothing malignant remained. The Dominion Alliance lasted 18 hours after they declared war on humanity, Korthak said, his voice flat with resignation. 18 hours from declaration to surrender. The pattern was clear by then. Humans don't fight to defeat their enemies. They don't fight to capture territory or resources or strategic advantages. He turned to face the assembled delegates, his compound eyes reflecting the harsh truth. They fight to win so completely that the question of future conflict becomes irrelevant. The chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems, each delegate processing the implications of what they had heard. 3 major military powers, Korthak said quietly. 3 different approaches to human conflict. 3 identical outcomes. Do you understand now? They don't want to fight. They want to win. Permanently. Completely. Finally. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the circular chamber, delegates sat frozen in their hovering seats, the weight of revelation pressing down on them like a physical force. Some flickered with distress, others had gone completely dark, and more than a few were making barely audible sounds that could have been prayers or whimpers. Counselor Vex Nash was the first to find her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Admiral, what are you saying? That humanity is some kind of galactic threat? That our peaceful neighbors are actually apex predators playing nice?" Korthak finished, his mandibles clicking with dark amusement. "The most dangerous species in known space, pretending to be harmless herbivores while they study every single one of us like specimens in a zoo. They know our strengths, our weaknesses, our fears, our hopes. They know exactly how to help us, and they know exactly how to destroy us." The holographic display now showed a galactic map with human territories marked in soft blue. Small, scattered colonies and research stations, trade outposts and diplomatic missions. It looked so innocent, so unthreatening. Until you realized that every single human presence was perfectly positioned for intelligence gathering and strategic advantage. "Look at the pattern," Korthak continued, gesturing to the display. "Human settlements aren't random. They're not based on resources or convenience or even livability. They're positioned at critical choke points, communication hubs, supply route intersections. Every human colony is a potential military base. Every human diplomat is a potential intelligence officer. Every human scientist is a potential weapons designer." Elder Thaxon of the Centaurian Collective finally spoke, his ancient voice trembling with fear. "What do you recommend, Admiral? How do we deal with this situation?" Korthak's laugh was utterly without humor. "Deal with it? Elder, we don't deal with apex predators. We respect them. We give them space. We don't threaten their young, we don't encroach on their territory, and we absolutely never, ever make them choose between their peaceful nature and their survival instincts." The Admiral turned to address the full assembly, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of absolute finality. "My recommendation to this council is simple, colleagues. Give them whatever they want. Territory, resources, trade agreements, research partnerships, cultural exchanges, diplomatic immunity, whatever they ask for. Because the alternative isn't negotiation or compromise or even conventional defeat." His compound eyes swept across the terrified faces of the assembled delegates. "The alternative is extinction. They avoid war the same way black holes avoid light, the same way gravity avoids falling upward, the same way death avoids the living." Korthak's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "Which is to say, they don't avoid it at all. They just make everyone think they do." Korthak moved away from the podium, his battle-scarred carapace catching the dim light as he walked slowly around the chamber's perimeter. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute certainty, the tone of a soldier who had stared into the heart of darkness and emerged forever changed. "Let me give you my final assessment of humanity," he said, stopping before the main viewing screen where images of the 3 destroyed civilizations continued to cycle in silent testimony. "These are not conquerors in the traditional sense. They don't seek territory for expansion or resources for wealth or populations for slavery. When humans go to war, they do it for one reason only, to ensure they never have to go to war again. The holographic display shifted to show peaceful human settlements, children playing in parks, families gathering for meals, scientists working in laboratories. The contrast with the military devastation they had just witnessed was jarring, almost incomprehensible. The most terrifying thing about humans isn't their weapons technology, though it's devastating, Korthak continued. It isn't their tactical brilliance, though it's unmatched. It isn't even their ability to infiltrate and understand their enemies, though that's what makes them so lethal. He paused, letting his words sink in. The most terrifying thing about humans is their mercy. A confused murmur rippled through the assembly. Counselor Vexnash's form flickered with bewilderment. Admiral, surely you misspoke. Their mercy? Korthak's mandibles clicked slowly, deliberately. Their mercy is more dangerous than their wrath, Counselor. Because their mercy means they genuinely try to avoid conflict. It means they exhaust every peaceful option, explore every diplomatic solution, extend every possible courtesy to potential enemies. It means that when they finally do resort to violence, when they finally conclude that war is inevitable, his voice trailed off into silence. When they conclude that war is inevitable, he continued, they do so with the absolute moral certainty that they tried everything else first. There's no hesitation, no doubt, no mercy left to give. They fight with the clean conscience of the righteous and the terrible efficiency of the prepared. The chamber had gone completely silent, even the life support system seeming to hold their breath. Korthak returned to the podium, placing all four hands on its crystal surface as he delivered his final words. So here's my advice to all of you, to every species, every government, every military commander who might be listening to this briefing. Pray to whatever gods you worship that humans keep avoiding war. Pray that their patience never runs out, that their mercy never expires, that their peaceful nature never gives way to their professional competence. His compound eyes swept across the assembly one final time, reflecting the cold light of absolute truth. Because when they stop avoiding it, civilizations end.